right, this is the last video I'm going to do for 7-5. This time we're going from a radical form to exponential form. So in the last video we went from exponential to radical. In this video we're going from radical to exponential. So starting here with number 14, I want to remember that in when we have an invisible index, that's always 2. So usually invisible things are 1, but when it's an index, it's a 2. So this is a square root, right? So when we rewrite that as an exponential, the numerator is the power, right? And then the denominator is the index. So this would be the answer to number 14. We're just taking the index and that becomes the denominator of our exponent. So this is a to the 3/2 would be our exponential form. Sorry. Yes, exponential form. Okay. So now let's look at number 16. So for number 16, again, we have a 2 here. So we get 49W, the power of 2 divided by 2, right? So power of 2 divided by 2. So that would simplify down, right? 2 divided by 2 is just 1. So this is really just 49W. That would be our final answer, would be 49W, because it's simplified. All right, I want to talk about a few more things that aren't part of the example problems, but you need to know them. So if I have something like, give me a second. If I have something, like this, where I have, say, a cube root of 2x squared. There's a couple of things I want to point out here. First of all, with the cube root, right, when I rewrite this as an exponential, our denominators are going to be 3. And I say denominators plural because notice that this isn't in parentheses. So the 2 only applies to the x, and this 2 only applies to the x. This 2 has an exponent of 1, right? That invisible exponent of 1. So when we make this in exponential form, it becomes 2 to the 1/3 x to the 2/3. Okay, so you have to distribute it between the two. If you have more than one thing with an exponent that's not in parentheses like this, right? If it's not in parentheses, then you have to distribute it to both of them. If that confuses you, you could rewrite it like this first, 2x squared to the 1/3, right? You could rewrite the cube root as a power of 1/3 and then distribute that, if that makes more sense to you. Whichever way makes more sense is fine. But that's how this goes. So you need to be aware of that, right? That you're distributing it to 2 separate things if they're not already in parentheses. And even if they are in parentheses, once we had changed this into exponential form, if the 2's hadn't canceled, we would have needed to distribute it after. But the 2's canceled, so we didn't have to do that. So you always want to distribute it so that you don't have parentheses. Just so that you know that it's in the most simplified form. Okay. So, and the other thing I want to talk about is if you can simplify first, you're allowed to do that. So what I mean by that is, for example, in number 16, we could have split, well, not exactly. If you have something where you don't have parentheses, so say we'd had something that's like number 14, but without the parentheses. So if I'd had 49 w squared, right? No parentheses. I could have split this up into the square root of 49. I don't know why I wrote this 2. It's invisible. Square root of 49, square root of w squared, right? I could have split it up into those two. I'm allowed to do that. That's something we're allowed to do with square roots. And so then we can see that the square root of 49 is just 7. So this would be 7 square root of w squared, and then I could rewrite that as an exponential. So 7w to the 2 over 2 is 7w to the 1, which I don't have to write. So if you didn't have parentheses, we couldn't do that here because we had these parentheses. Okay? But if you didn't have parentheses, then you can split it up and you could simplify this first and then turn it into an exponent. You're allowed to do that. Whether or not you want to would depend, I guess, on the question, on the situation, but you're allowed to do that. Okay, hopefully that helps. Let me know if you have any questions, and I will see you in the next video.